I think the lifestyle of homeschooling gives him more room to be able to put those things into play. I feel like it's, even though he's not home, he's integrated into it. He knows what we're working on. We talk about it at dinner time. We send him pictures of their work throughout the day, and he's so good at giving a different perspective. So even though he's not home with us, I feel like he is integrated in what we're doing, which I love.
Welcome to the Homeschool Perspective, where seasoned homeschooling moms share tips, insights, and resources to empower your homeschool journey.
So today we're going to talk about dads. With Father's Day coming, it seemed like the perfect topic for the homeschool perspective. And there are so many ways that dads can contribute to the experience of homeschooling with their families. So let's talk, ladies. Was your husband on board when you decided to start homeschooling?
Oh goodness. So I think I've mentioned this before, but I was homeschooled for the end of my education. And then I went and got my credentials. I was like, I'm bringing this magic, right? We're going to bring this in, and realized like that just wasn't how it worked. And so I knew pretty early that my kids would all be homeschooled, all of them. Like I knew even before I had finished my credential, I was like, my children will be homeschooled. And so when we were dating, that's how I spoke about it. Once it started, like our dating started shifting, and I was like, oh, this might be like a forever thing. I was very like, hey, my kids will be homeschooled, so you have to figure that out for yourself if you want to be in or not. And my husband was really like, I mean, no, zero experience. Did not actually, I take that back. He had cousins who were homeschooled, but it was the one hippie contingent that married into the family. And he really just like had no frame of context. Eventually he got to a place he's like, well, definitely in, preschool and, then kindergarten, and then we'll see. We'll see how it goes from there. And so that's how we got started. But now my husband will tell literally anybody that homeschooling is amazing. And he's so glad that we did it. And he absolutely loves it. But it was a year to year thing. I would say for him, the big switch happened when our second daughter started doing some school, and he could see the two kids and how different they are, and how they were each excelling differently. And it was like, oh yeah, this is good stuff.
Allie, when you are saying the credential, were you talking about teaching credentials?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you were an education major?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was I was a leadership and organizational studies major, and then in true homeschooler fashion, I went to the university I graduated from, and I was like, "Hey, can I make my own major?" So
Yeah.
I went and did leadership and organizational studies within education, and then I did my first credential at the same time I was finishing my bachelor's.
Because
So,
you're in California, and so California talks about credential a lot, but in other states, they don't call it the credential. It's like a
oh,
just
okay.
yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that. I also started as with a teaching degree, but I was teaching music, and I saw from the inside out what the school system was like here in our area. I grew up in going to all the different types of schools. Like I did like private Christian school, even just like a regular private school. It was actually a Catholic school, and then I did uh a lot of public school and homeschool for the end of mine, just like you, Allie. So it was like I had all of these experiences, all of these different takeaways. But my public school experience was like really amazing. The place we were in was like just awesome. And so after teaching in down here where I am, I was like, I don't know, like, and I was feeling really torn. However, my husband grew up going to a small private school and having just that one, like having that one-on-one or like really small to one interactions with his teachers and his peers, and he wanted something more like that for our kids. And so we didn't really start that conversation until my oldest was about 3. It wasn't like like a prerequisite for marriage like it was for you, Allie, but it was something that we went back and forth between, and just the way that our schedule goes, my husband is a personal trainer. And so at the time, he was working later into the evenings. And he's like, gosh, if I ever want to see my kids, then we need to, they need to be up later. And you can't have kids up late if they're waking up early for school in the morning. So that was kind of like the tipping point. He knew what he wanted. I was more open to anything because I had that wide range of experience as a kid growing up, but I also kind of knew, what I didn't want for my family. But it was when we started thinking about him and him being involved with the kids, not just, in their preschool years, but like their whole school age. It was like, if we want to maintain what we have as a family and
Mhm.
what works for our family, then homeschooling is going to be the only option, because where, they can sleep in, we can start school at 10 o'clock if we need to. There's no, so they can stay up till, to 9 o'clock and not feel like they're going to have no, energy for school the next day. So that was kind of how we went. And once all of that, once we kind of put it all together, he was totally on board.
That
I think I'm the odd one out here. I do not have a teaching degree. My degree is in organizational leadership and management. And I have two theology degrees, lots of experience in youth ministry and children's ministry and teaching that way, but not an actual teaching degree.
I think that's
Yeah,
actually a benefit. I will just say, I think that my education degree, and I've heard this from so many people, and
yep.
Allie is nodding. So, people with teaching degrees and experience in the classroom, I feel like everyone thinks that that's an advantage when they're like, oh, well, of course you homeschool, you're a teacher. It's like, I don't know. I think that that's a disadvantage. So I'm just throwing that out there. It
Yeah,
is,
it's definitely
I don't
something to
think
overcome.
it is.
You have to overcome that in your homeschool.
It
well, for
is.
us, my only exposure to homeschooling had been the family that I was a mother's helper for when I was in junior high and high school. They had 8 kids and they homeschooled. And it was in New York State, which is a high regulation state. And I remember
Mhm.
thinking, this is insane. I don't know how she does it. She's superwoman, right? Which I guess is probably partially why I was there being a mother's helper sometimes. But I could never do this. And that was my only entertainment with it. And I did not decide to homeschool until the day I put my daughter into her car seat to go register her for school.
Oh,
And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. She was like, "Why am I going to leave you, mommy?" And she started crying and I started crying and I was like, "I don't think we are." And my husband came home from work and I was like nervously waiting at the front door going, "You know how that thing I said I would never do, like never homeschool?" I also said I probably didn't want kids and we had 8. So, like, clearly I was confused, but I was like, I think I want to homeschool like this year and we can reevaluate next year." And he was like, "Sure, go for it." And I literally dipped my toe in 1 year at a time those first 3 years. And it wasn't until our second child started homeschooling officially that I was like, "Oh, we're homeschoolers." Before that, I was like, "Okay, well, I'm homeschooling this year," was how I told people,
right.
right?
Mhm.
Like, that was how I said it. And my husband was so funny because he would say, "Well, my wife's homeschooling right now." We were really slow to realize that we had leapt in both feet to the homeschooling lifestyle because we didn't understand it and we both had these odd
Mhm.
preconceived ideas of what it was. And when I finally realized we didn't have to be in the box, I was hooked. And for him, I think it was amazing when he got shifted to second shift and eventually third shift. And we literally just moved the rhythm of our day so that we could still have time with dad. That was when we were like, this is the best thing to ever happen to our family.
Yeah.
So for us, it was a really slow journey and it was one step at a time.
I love
I
it. The
love
toe
that.
dipper. It's
Yeah.
like so many families go that way, and it's beautiful. It's an awesome way to get going. It
We
Now
doesn't
I
also
have to be all or nothing.
we each have really different personalities, so I'm guessing our husbands are also probably not similar to each other. Did your husbands have any resources or statistics or any kind of influence that they really liked as you started homeschooling that you shared with them or that they encountered?
My husband had the new people that were homeschooled. So he knew adults that were like my brother-in-law is one of them. He homeschooled K through 12. And they're great friends, like, because we all went to college together. My sister and I are close. And so they're close. And so that evidence of seeing, a successful person that has been homeschooled his entire life. That was, I think, something that was really important for my husband to see. He also had friends growing up that had started in homeschool and then came to their school, and they're still like they're lifelong friends. So it's just that I think that that pattern of seeing it, that was like, oh yeah, well, they turned out great, so our kids will too.
I love that. That's awesome. So with my husband, so we actually just had our 12th wedding anniversary, but we've been together for almost 18 years.
Hmm.
So we were very young when this conversation started. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm not super proud with how I started the conversation. I may have been a little bit of a bulldozer in that moment because to me it was like it was just so obvious. It was so obvious. Like, why would you do anything else? I mean, I was a, 19, 20-year-old, like, it was just, what's
Of
wrong with you?
course, this
Like,
is how you would do it. You'd be
why would
stupid
you do
not to.
anything else, right? Like, just super, I was just young. I was young, and that's, you have your big ideals. But over time, as I learned more too, like, learned more about being in a relationship, being married, but also in seeing friends and family and people around me going through this, and then supporting families and going through this transition and figuring out if this is a good fit for them. I found some really incredible resources. My husband's in computer technology, IT, programming stuff. So he is a very analytical person. And if it can't be justified numerically, then it's a much harder sell. And so I love the National Home Education Research Institute. We'll make sure to put the link in. It's a really great resource. They put all of the studies that have been done in relation to homeschoolers. So studies on socialization, studies on academic progress, studies on family unity, on what happens when they're adults, on jobs, on all of the things, entrance into college. They have all of those studies in one place. I also definitely geek out on those things. So I do love that as a resource, I think. And there is kind of a tendency for more men to be like that way, where they like to have the data. So I think that's a really great one. And then I also books there. My husband and I both, we love to read. And we share what is it? Amazon, the Audible. We
Audible.
share an Audible account. And so, I'll just message him like, go that one, go read that one, listen to that one. And we'll read books. And I feel like some of the most profoundly effective ones that we've read together or that we've discussed and that I've seen other families discuss as well are The Underground History of American Education and Dumbing Us Down. I think those two have been by far the most effective as far as understanding the vision, how it works, and how the other systems work as well. So I would say those are like the top resources when you're having these conversations and figuring out, because it's hard to know how you feel about something if you don't fully understand it too. So
Right.
like the more context you have, I think it really helps. So I would say those are my top options there.
Yeah, for us, like I said, we were toe dippers, so it's kind of been a gradual thing. One of my husband's favorite books was Hunt, Gather, Parent.
That's a good
That
one.
was that was a big one for him. He read it a couple years ago. Well, he listened to it, and I didn't know he was listening to it. And then I heard him talking to another dad, and he was like, "Well, I mean, have you considered this?" And he was like quoting some passages from the book, and I was like, "Okay, we're getting excited now." And it's been a gradual thing for him, but he listens to, he'll see it show up in the Audible account kind of a thing and grab what looks good to him. But for him, that was definitely one of the more profound books.
That is such a great one. I hadn't e that's have you guys read that book?
I
Mhm.
haven't.
It's a completely different perspective than we hear a lot of the times about parenting, and it focuses in on other cultures. A lot of there's some South American cultures, and anyway, it focuses on how you're supposed to be doing life together. That
Mm.
kids don't actually need these like customized sensory bin situations. They need to do dishes with you in the
Oh,
in the bubbles.
I've heard this book, or I've seen like snippets from it, like something like that, because that where the kids are in other cultures, they start in with the chores like right away, and that's
Yes.
how they just are doing life together, and they feel really fulfilled with
Mhm.
their with what they're doing because they're part of a working team, they're part of a system, but that whole like family is working together towards a common goal. I haven't read the book, but yeah,
You definitely get it. Well, and
yes.
I think too, that's a really great one, and I forgot my husband and I read that one, but for him, I remember him saying that the thing he liked most about that is that he could directly feel the impact, like, it made sense to him. It
Mhm.
didn't feel like he was a kid who in school wouldn't do any of the homework, but would ace all the tests, and then he would get in trouble for not doing the homework, and he thought it was just the Oh, you were the same way. He thought it was just the lamest thing ever, and so when he's looking at schooling stuff, he's already skeptical to start with about,
Mhm.
what actually has value, and if they already know it, why are we doing, that kind of thing. And so that part of Hunt Gather Parent, just seeing, doing things that have a direct impact or like you're learning an actual skill that you're utilizing in that moment was something that really resonated with him too. It's a good book.
So, one of the things that I liked about Hunt Gather Parent is that it shows how much value we all bring to our kids' education and life experiences. And I know we've probably all experienced this in different ways, but our husbands bring a lot to the table. They can support us financially, they can support us emotionally, they can support us practically and educationally. What are some contributions your husbands have made to your kids' homeschool experience?
So my husband is not typically home. Like he has more traditional hours. He's not home when we're doing like the bulk of our homeschool. He will take days off when I have to be doing other things as a homeschool CEO, and he follows the systems and he does, he'll do school when we need to do that. But I feel like he's contributed, yes, in being a sounding board, and sometimes we call and FaceTime him at work for, things that come up that I know he can explain in a different way or talk through. And sometimes that's behavior and mindset. And other times it can be like actual math problems or something because we have such different brains. So we will call him and be like, hey, can you talk Grady through this fractions problem? Because I've done it 4 ways to Sunday and I need you to need you to give him another option. But also, we have built-in routines because learning is so integrated into our life that like at nighttime he's reading, doing a lot of the read alouds with the kids. We When we go on, trips and things, he finds really great museums that he wants to take us all to, and we do lots of conversations about that. And then he has things he's really passionate and excited about. My husband's a big sports guy, so he teaches them how to kick balls and catch balls and do all of that stuff. He also loves coding. So, for my oldest birthday this year, we got him a Raspberry Pi. And so he and my husband have been, it's like a little chip micro computer brain thing that they've been, pranking the rest of the family and making the lights flicker and, do all that kind of stuff. So, I think the lifestyle of homeschooling gives him more room to be able to put those things into place. And the fact that my kids even think along those lines, like, oh, dad, like teaching and being with dad in that way, I think really helps too. But those are some of the ways. I feel like it's, even though he's not home, he's integrated into it. He knows what we're working on. We talk about it at dinner time. We send him pictures of their work throughout the day. So he is such a big cheerleader for all of us. And he's so good at giving a different perspective. So even though he's not home with us, I feel like he is integrated in what we're doing, which I love.
Yeah, I'd say my husband is very like the things you were saying, I'm like, "Yep, my husband does that. My husband does that." But it's probably totally different because my husband's not a coder and but he is gone. He's gone a lot. And so he's not actively involved in teaching math or grammar or any of those things. Like he's not here during the day, so he's not taking that role, especially for like the core subjects. But he definitely can sit down and work through it in a different way with my kids. Or if they get very frustrated with me during the day, then when he's home at night, he'll sit down and work with them, on like whatever they're struggling with. Or he'll be the one that like the kids will read to him. So they're reading to somebody else, not just reading to me. And it feels different when it's dad, it's just different.
Mhm.
But my husband also does all of the does like read alouds at night, like that he read through the entire Harry Potter series with one of my kids, and now they're doing the Chronicles of Narnia. So it's like these it's not school, but like you were saying, Allie, it's like integrated. Homeschooling is so integrated into our family culture that
Mhm.
it's just layers of learning, and it's just a different perspective, and it's just a different, just a different way of bringing all of those things in to, and you're able to do it because you've got your things that you do. I've got my things that I do with my kids during the day, but dad has all of these other ways that he contributes into their lives. So like I said, he's a personal trainer, so he's got the kids out, like in the gym. He's got them doing stuff. He
Okay.
works through them on sports and stuff like that. He reads to them. We love to do hiking, or like when we go on vacations, everything we do, like he's just thinking adventure, honestly, and I'm thinking like, well, let's tie this in, so, or let's at least, like I don't know, not to make it weird or not to make it like, well, now kids, let's explore how this hiking adventure fits into what we learned this year. No, I don't do that. But just, having those
We do a little bit.
experiences.
I do.
You do you sound like I just did when you're presenting
Of
it to your kids?
of course. That's yeah, no, I but that was funny. Sorry, go ahead.
But we love doing that kind of stuff, and we were even talking about, going to Washington, DC, and kind of making that a trip, and he was talking about how much, my kids would love it because of their interests, and how they're at a good age for it, and then I said, "Yeah, and actually we're just starting in history to talk about things. So this would be a really good time." And so he's like, all right, well, let's plan it. So planning those things together, and having a sounding board, and having somebody else who's like ready to go for those adventures, and ready to step in and start planning it. I don't know. That's just how, those are some ways, like you were saying, just, I can't even think of all of the ways, but it's just so integrated in our lives, that this is just how we're doing life.
I
Yes,
love that he brings the adventure. That's
He
awesome.
does.
I'm hearing the theme that dads really bring a lot of added fun to it too. Like we make it as fun as we can, but dads bring it in a different way. So in our family, how I said we kind of did it year by year, and we eased our way in. When we hit third grade, I looked at my husband and I said, if we're going to keep doing this, you have to be the math person. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I'll buy teaching textbooks. They'll teach the lessons. They'll grade the stuff. But when they don't get it, I'm not it. And I did, like, I literally was like, "Not it, you can't make me." And he was like, "No problem." And he worked 2 jobs back then. And so they would do math at the oddest times of day so that if they had questions, dad was there, or we would call him on his lunch break or whatever. And he has been the math guy now for 16 years. And that is it. Like my son comes out today and he's like, "Where's daddy?" And I'm like, "Oh, he's at the store. Can I help you?" And he goes, "No, it's a math problem."
They
See,
know.
how this works now.
Yeah,
But the other thing that my husband did is I'm a planner. I actually plan spontaneity into my schedule. So that
that's
like to surprise
hilarious.
my kids, right? Like so I planned it, but they're surprised by it because that is how much of a planner I am. And my husband's the kind of guy who's like, the kids are like, oh, that looks cool. He's like, let's explore it. Right. And that brought such a new life into our homeschool, teaching our kids, like, because I would say, oh, cool, let's read about it, let's talk about it. And I would plan to learn about it. And he would just jump in, and not in a chaotic way, in a very, oh, you're interested right now. Let's nourish that interest right now. And so for him, it was this ability to see what was making them come alive and giving them the freedom to jump in. You know, dads have a different influence than moms do. And so it just hit them differently. And I noticed that my kids mimic dad almost more than they mimic mom, even when he was working 2 jobs. They would see him reading his Bible every morning, so they started reading their Bible every morning. They would see him working in the yard every evening before dinner, and he'd be like, "I just want to, like, work up my appetite." And they would go out and start picking up stuff in the yard every night before dinner. So when they started seeing him intrigued by, like, "Oh, I wonder how that science thing works or how this nature thing happened," and he would just jump in and find the answer, they started following suit, and it created this beautiful pattern in their lives that's all because of his example. And
Because more is caught than taught.
then right,
Mm.
and so
Ooh,
dads
yes.
teach us so much just by being there and being active. My next question for y'all was gonna be highlighting how their unique talents and interests have affected your homeschooling, but you guys kind of brought that into the last question. Is there anything you'd add to that?
I had a thought while you were talking. We have all been in our homeschooling journey for a while now. And so I'm wondering, and I'm thinking back and I'm thinking of friends and things. Uh, it doesn't come naturally, I think, for a lot of people to even look at their kids this way or look at the relationship that way. Because, I'm thinking my husband and, to my dear sweet mother-in-law, who I absolutely adore, I love you. But I'm going to say this real quick. Tiger mom. She was a tiger mom because that's the culture and that's how she grew up. And that's how, so, time with kids after school was like, okay, we're drilling piano, we're drilling math, we're drilling these things, which was great and wonderful. That worked for them. And that's not the way we jam. But I think a lot of the context that my husband and a lot of people have, is that, after school, we are authority working with kids on homework, or we are having our rest time. Like there's this kind of idea where that spontaneity, or like following the rabbit holes, um or even like looking at reading at night as an opportunity to learn and discuss and build that relationship. I don't know that it comes naturally to everybody. And I'm not trying to remember, but I'm not really feeling like it came super naturally to my husband in the beginning either.
I
It
can
takes
tell you where
time.
we started. We used the Mystery of history curriculum. In the beginning, we ended up switching and then going back to it. But at one point in time, somewhere, somehow, maybe in their printable resources, maybe somewhere else, I don't remember, but they had conversation questions for dad. And the idea was, while mom's teaching this, dad still gets to be part of it. Here are questions he can ask the kids to get them talking about what they learned that day. And that was it for us, because I no longer had to explain things to my husband, because before I was like sending voice messages, here's what we learned today, so the kids can talk to you about it. And it was like tedious for both of us. We didn't really enjoy that. But then I was like, I would just snap a picture of the cards and send them to his phone, and he could ask the kids questions. And we only did that for that one school year, because then it became really natural. But it was like someone had to teach us to do that kind of engagement. As far as the adventure thing, that's his personality, and I think dads who aren't like that also bring a lot to the table.
Yeah.
Because kids are they're a mix of both of us, so whatever they pick up is helpful in seeing them engage. But I will say that sometimes having those "here's the questions to ask" is really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great idea, and I remember prodding, like, in the beginning, prodding my husband to, like, "Okay, ask them questions, like, ask them what they did today," like, to get him involved, and, like, now it comes natural, but I think that husbands while you guys were talking, I was thinking about I think our husbands needed, or at least mine did, needed to, deschool, a little
Hmm.
bit. He kind of had this, like, school was during this time mentality. You learn the things during this time, then you might have homework afterwards. Like even with homeschooling, like because he had never done it, he never participated in it. He had this different sort of feeling of how the structure should be. Even so, if he
Hmm.
would come home, he used to have a break in the middle of the day. And actually, at one point, he kind of took his Saturday morning on Tuesday. So he was home all Tuesday morning. And he was like, what is I need to leave so you guys can get started. And I'm like, we've been doing school all morning, but it was just kind of integrated into our day. And he had to go through a process where, and I helped him explaining it to him, like, this is how homeschooling looks. It doesn't look like school. The kids don't have to have their butts in a seat. They don't have to be sitting at a table or a desk, or they can lay on the floor or be outside, or go out and come in. And especially when my kids were really little, I mean, it was like, it was all, it looked like chaos. If you had shown up at my house on any given day at a given time, it kind of looked a little chaotic. It didn't look like how school should look. And so he was having a hard time with that at the beginning. Like, how is this school? So I think, like, over time, going through that kind of a deschooling process, like throwing away all those expectations of what school should look like, and then pulling in, like, with me saying, when you read to the kids at night, that's, read aloud, and then maybe equating it to, when you were in school, did you have a teacher that read aloud to you? And he's like, yeah, it was like the best part of the day. And I'm like, okay, well, in homeschool, you can do that before you go to bed. And he's like, Oh, so
Yeah.
just like kind of noticing, I think that's the big thing is like noticing what you're doing and how that is how you can relay that to your husband, or because they might not understand, if especially if they don't have experience with homeschooling growing up, that what you're doing is how it is benefiting them, or even what the parallels are in traditional school, so that they can see that that yeah, it's different, but we're still getting the work done, you know?
I
I love
yes,
that.
yes, I love that. And also that it doesn't have to be organized to be educational or like be valuable time spent together.
Right,
Cuz I think like sometimes my husband's like, "Okay, well can you take the kids to," or used to be. I feel like we've come to a really good place with this, but like, "Can you take the kids so I can go do this thing in the yard or do this thing in the," and over time, I think through conversation realizing that like no, 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 including the kids in that, you can share that with them. Like, just bring them with you, talk to them about what you're doing. You may, because I don't think they realize too that a lot of things they do are so valuable
right.
and like are valuable to talk their kids through. It doesn't have to be this, okay, I went and got this thing and now I'm going to sit with you and I'm going to teach you this thing. Just bringing them along and sharing the process that they're going through for all the cool things that they do to help our families run is also a really, and then things they enjoy. Like, if you have a husband who loves watching football, like, okay, can you have the kids sit with you and talk them through the game so that they can enjoy it with you? Like, it doesn't need to be these big organized things. Or if
There
you
doesn't
have,
need to be a lesson plan, or
it
you don't
doesn't.
need to have bought it, with
Yes.
the activities on there in order for it to be educational and school.
Yeah, and anything that they love to do, or anything that they do anyways to take care of their family is a great thing to share and include their kids on. I feel like I know my husband, he underestimates the value that
Mhm.
he brings to the kids when he brings them in. So I think that's another way, another conversation to have is like, there's so much that they can bring to our kids.
So, in wrapping up here, dads are awesome. They're amazing parts of homeschool, whether they're teaching or not. And it's a journey, right?
Mm,
So, what I took away from what you gals were saying was in the beginning, you had to explain it, Rachel. And I love that you explained it to him, the different parts. And Allie, how you said your husband is super, super focused and needed to see the data. And, he had to learn in that deschooling process. And for us, we were just experimenting. And
mhm.
I think what I'm hearing is just like we have our own homeschooling journeys as homeschooling moms, dads have their journey too. And it's great to give them the space to take that journey, to encourage them, to help them, but to let them add their own flavor of support to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Uh,
noticing, and maybe even noticing for them how they're doing
and
that.
appreciating what they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to
Yes.
encourage all the ladies listening to the podcast, and dad, if you're tuning in, thank you. But let's be intentionally appreciative of the efforts. In the show notes, we are going to drop the resources that Allie mentioned, the books that we talked about. Be sure to check those out. And we will see you next time.
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.